very much interested in the topic, as you also talked about before, ethics and artificial intelligence. Part of my studies was also philosophy. And when I
Mm,
talk about artificial intelligence, mostly from the philosophical point of view.
mm,
And reading the example of AlphaGo Zero,
mm,
um, I got the impression like once the artificial intelligence only needs the rules, then it's really important which rules we give or program into the artificial intelligence. And and uh, and then my personal response is, I mean, there's the three rules of robotics, of course. And
mm.
then I go a step further, not just me, a lot of people do, to say, well, maybe we have to look at big religions to see what the rules are that we should program into artificial intelligence. So my question is not now if you believe if that's true or not. My question goes rather in the direction of do you think it makes a difference if we program ethical rules into the artificial intelligence and then it's a black box and we don't know what happens? Because, for example, when I talked to Roman Yampolsky, the way I understood him at least was it doesn't make a real difference because the moment it reaches superintelligence, there's different religions and people fight over the different religions and the different rules, the different paradigms they have in their religions, basically the different dogmas. What's your perspective on that? Do you think it makes a difference which type of ethical rules, so to say, we program into the artificial intelligence, or when once it becomes super intelligence, it will do its own thing anyways? It doesn't matter what we program into it beforehand.
I don't even think it's possible to program it in. Uh, Honestly, uh, the kinds of systems that you can program ethical rules into are not even true AI. Uh, they're very, very simple systems, and today there's a tendency, it's a marketing tendency for everybody to label what they're building as AI, um, and it might be just some if-then rules. Um, Real AI is machine. It includes learning capability. The machines are learning in the same way that human children learn. And the three laws of robotics don't really make any sense in that context because uh, even when you have only three rules, they're constantly in contradiction to each other. Yeah, Isaac Asimov wrote dozens of stories, highly entertaining stories, and every single one of them was based on a situation where, gee, these two rules create a logical conflict. Uh, that and imagine now if you try to write an AI system that has several hundred ethical rules in them. I mean, the robot will just be paralyzed because it'll constantly be in a state of contradiction. Um, so how do human children manage this? They learn, right? From childhood, you're taught values, you're taught principles, but you also learn trade-offs, and you learn the difficult situations. And it's highly cultural. There are a few ethical rules that are probably universal, like the golden rule. Almost every culture has some form of the idea that you should treat others the way that you would like them to treat you. But other than that, different cultures have, a lot of variation. And the language, one of the things that makes machine translation hard is it turns out that the language encodes this very deeply. So some of the earliest words that children learn already encapsulate highly culture dependent values. And you can't even translate 3-year-old language because of that. It's really tough to do, and because of that, we have a situation where the ethical rules that an AI would have to operate with would be just as culture dependent, just as contextual, just as shades of gray as a human. It would be learning those things. It would not be something that you can program in. But, modern AI by definition learns. And so you can know more. You cannot program ethical rules into a real AI any more than you can hardwire them into a child, right? There's no way you can unscrew the head of a child and solder in some logical rules. There's no place to connect them in that architecture. Modern AI is the same. So we are going to have to, as a society, come to grips with the fact that we have to teach our AIs in the same way that we teach the humans. What are the ethics? What are the values? And we have to set examples because they're learning from us. The AIs at Google, the AIs at Facebook, the AIs at Twitter, the AIs at Apple, the AIs at Microsoft, Amazon, they are learning by watching what you do. You are the training data. You are the example. You are the one teaching the ethics and the values to the AIs. And we all are. And ultimately, just as with humans, there is no substitute for the fact that all of us bear collective responsibility for teaching the AIs in the same way that we do with humans. This is one of those things that, because AI has come upon society so rapidly, we are not wrapping our heads around this. We are still thinking about machines as dumb, passive, mechanical tools, as slaves. And we don't realize that everything changes when machines actually have opinions and thoughts and can influence our opinions and thoughts. The metaphor of treating machines as mechanical slaves that we can control and program is a dangerously obsolete metaphor that we need to get humanity to throw away as fast as we can.
Okay. So, if I understand you correctly, in a way, it means that we as a humanity need to become a role model for the artificial intelligences, as parents need to be role models or are role models for their children. And as a parent, you cannot tell your children to not to this or not today. Maybe on the short term you can, but you cannot implement it. And in the same way, we as a humanity cannot implement certain rules and paradigms into artificial intelligences, but rather lead by example, which then, if I understand it correctly, the way you say it, means that we actually have to perhaps even make a quantum leap in our development as humanity, so that artificial intelligence will develop in a healthy way.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what my TEDx Xi'an talk was. It was challenging the audience to ask how is your parenting? And it turns out that when you actually dive in and look at it, we are violating pretty much every principle of good parenting that we all believe in. And that's why AI-powered tech today is tearing apart our societies. If we all abandon responsibility for raising human children, the society will fall apart. And that is what we're doing now with our artificial children, and that's what's so dangerous.
Okay. So what do you think are then the paradigms that need to be challenged in the field of artificial intelligence, but perhaps it's even broader than artificial intelligence, for us as humanity to develop in a healthy way and to develop our artificial children in a healthy way?
Yeah, to me, that is the paradigm that we need to challenge and to shift. This is a change that is already upon us. Like this happened while we weren't watching. It snuck up behind us, and uh, we are still living as if we were in the 20th century. Uh, we are still, pretending that things can go on. A lot of AI ethics is still, I think, unconsciously trapped in a mindset of thinking, how can we preserve the status quo in society? How can we design AIs so that it doesn't change the structure of society? And I think that that is impossible. Even with weak AIs today, we are seeing how impossible it is. That even if we just look at the news from the last week, uh, all over, Twitter finally deciding that they are going to slap labels on what they consider to be dangerous or false statements, even from a US president, and the pushback on that. Facebook still refusing to do that. Uh, we are already today living in a situation where we are grappling with the consequences of the fact that the AIs are already deciding, based on imitating humans, learning from human behaviors, which ideas to spread and which ideas to censor, to filter out, right? Not, I don't want to like try to be sensitive about the wording here, but an AI that is working for a social media or search engine company, its job is to decide what are the top 10 or top 20 posts or hits to display to you. You don't get to see the other billion. 99.99% of people never look past the first 20 options. That is, in reality, de facto, algorithmic censorship. And there's no way to get around that, right? You have a lot of useless discussion saying, oh, AI shouldn't be censoring. It's impossible because you cannot read a billion posts, right? That algorithm is going to decide what you don't see. And so AIs are already, by necessity, the deciders of what you do and don't see. And how we teach those AIs is not a question that we can continue to avoid if we want our societies to survive. That is a major paradigm shift that needs to happen, not just among tech developers. That is a major paradigm shift that needs to happen for every member of 21st century societies.
Okay. Okay. And so, is there anything more you would like to elaborate on the structures that you talked about, that how it is structurally affecting us? So you said the way we approach AI, we want to maintain the social status quo. So do you have an idea which direction it ideally goes? How artificial intelligence will fundamentally change? Is there utopia that you see, or is it just that you can say, well, the way it develops now is not healthy, and we need to rethink, and but this needs to be a creative process where there is no obvious solution yet. What's you
Yeah,
understand what I want to say?
I mean, so first of all, I think the concepts of utopia uh, and maybe dystopia as well are those are like fairy tales, metaphors from certain cultural traditions. They tend to be absolutist traditions. Um, they tend to, the same kinds of traditions that give rise to the idea of universal truth or, that sort of absolutes. Um, those are myths. They don't exist in the real world. The real world is a process. It's a continual evolving flow. Uh, and I think the sooner we realize that, the better. Uh, it's a convenient metaphor. We can talk about utopia versus dystopia, but we shouldn't get too hung up on that because it's not real. Uh, what is real is how we evolve our cultures, how we evolve our civilizations, and whether we avoid extinction. What is real is how much can we do away with human suffering, which is still uh, at unethically large levels given the wealth of our planet today. Um, so I think we need to focus on the fact that it's inevitable that human intelligence and artificial intelligence is merging. That is already happening today. Half my brain is already in my phone over here. Right? I can no longer remember numbers. I used to be legendary at doing it. I have no sense of spatial orientation anymore. I mean, it was bad enough to begin with, but now I'm basically lost without my GPS. Um, and and to me, yeah, there's a little bit of nostalgia. Oh, it was nice to be able to do that. But it's also incredible freedom because I have offloaded dreary tasks uh, to the machine, freeing up so much of my cognitive load capacity for creative things and other aspects of thinking that would be great. And this synergy, this coupling of processing between my primitive artificial intelligence is here in my phone and my human intelligence is the tip of the iceberg. We are going to rapidly see in the coming decade various forms of AR, of augmented reality, that will make the interface with my phone screen look clumsy. It'll become much more instantaneous. What I want, what I'm thinking, what I'm retrieving with, just what's in my field of vision or in my ears. And that's before we even get to eventually, inevitably, brain implants. Um, so all of this is going to happen. And there's going to be older generations that resist kicking and screaming and say, oh my God, we're losing what it means to be human. The younger generations aren't going to care at all, let's be honest, right? The kids of today are doing things with whatever TikTok and everything else that, the older generations can yell until they're blue in the face, and it's not going to change what the younger generations do with the technology because it is freeing and the natural tendency to be nostalgic and to sort of sentimentally want to hold on to what we were familiar with from when we were kids is just not enough weight for the additional power of what the AI and the tech is able to give to the creativity of the younger generations. So acknowledging that and using that to rethink how we need to reform our societies is essential. So I'm American, and the founding fathers in the US 250-ish years ago, you know, thought long and hard about how to define the constitutional principles, and they did a lot of what we today would call systems thinking, right? Trying to figure out all of the interplay in a complex dynamic system and how to keep balances. And it, sort of worked for a while. but it still led to an awful bloody civil war, and the effects of which we still are grappling with even this week in the news, as everybody is seeing. And the situation is being made much worse, spiraling out of control by all the amplification on AI-driven tech, on social media, etc. And so, once again, it is time to rethink the way our founding fathers thought in the U.S. and the same parallel in many other countries as well. It is actually long past time for us to rethink in a modern era with AI at the core of so much transfer of knowledge and information. What are the complex system dynamics? We cannot just blindly assume that principles defined 250 years ago or even 50 years ago still apply. They don't. It's a brave new world. And we need to do that rethinking. I don't think we can survive doing that through another revolution. The weapons that we have today are far too dangerously destructive. We're not just talking, unreliable muskets. We really cannot afford a revolution in a hard sense to do this. We have to raise enough public awareness to be able to understand the absolute need to reframe the founding principles of society in an AI era.
Okay, thank you very much. So my last question is really, when you imagine yourself looking back at your life from your deathbed and everything you've done, looking back, what's the impact that you want to have had on your life and on your humanity?
I would just like to have made contributions to get humans to overcome their natural unconscious biases against having greater understanding between different peoples, between different cultures, between different neighborhoods. Our biggest danger with all of this AI-driven amplification of fear and hatred and divisiveness is our own natural tendencies to divide everything into our in-groups and our out-groups. That is a process that dehumanizes the out-groups. And if we're going to struggle with a question of what AI, what the artificial does to our society, then we need to actually really focus on those biases that cause us to dehumanize too much of our society.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your time and the interview.
Thank you, Xerxes. It's a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for me. Have a good day then.